Welcome to another California Guy video with your boy California Guy. What's up, everybody, and welcome to this all new video. This video is going to be entitled Dr. Martin Luther King versus White Supremacy. Now, as of late, this is a Black History Month video, Black History Month themed video. And so I thought to do this video based off some ideas from another video I was going to do, but I didn't upload it yet. So I wanted to share this video with you guys today on Martin Luther King and his struggles against white supremacy. Now, as of late, I've noticed in the last maybe 12 years that a lot of white politicians, white entertainers, and different people around the United States have used the name of Martin Luther King, and some blacks too. They use the name of Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks as basically props. They will not. They point out certain videos. They cherry pick certain things that Martin Luther King has done in Rosa Parks, and they almost made them into caricatures. And I look at the censoring of Dr. Martin Luther King because basically he's been censored and he's been turned to basically a symbol to either get black voters, black museums, or even black movies, featuring Martin Luther King and some of his ideals. But they will not really give you a deep historical lesson because they have made Martin Luther King, just like they did Abraham Lincoln almost, into a caricature of the United States. A myth caricature, I'm sorry. And I'm here to break down the real truth. Martin Luther King Jr. was battling white supremacy in the 50s. That was why Martin Luther King was killed. Now, white supremacists won't tell you, and coons will not tell you the real truth about Martin Luther King. They say, well, he wanted to kumbaya with white people and black people, black girls, and little white girls and little black boys holding hands. That was bullshit. That was part of the argument. That was part of a speech that was taken and ran with it, or judged the content of the character of a man and all that stuff that I hear coons and white conservatives say. Now, they separate those speeches, but they will not talk about why Dr. King even said the speeches because it seems like it's disjointed. But we go back in time. Martin Luther King was selected by the black churches in the mid 50s because let's break down Martin Luther King. Before Dr. Martin Luther King even came into prominence, you had other black ministers in the Deep South. These are facts. And in the East Coast, all over the United States, you had different black leaders. The stuff that Martin Luther King was doing, what he was going to do for black people in battling white supremacy, was an ideal and a thought that was taking place since the end of slavery, almost since slavery and beyond slavery. It was getting ready to explode going into the 50s and early 60s. What made Martin Luther King come into prominence was a few situations that it was timing, in which white people and white supremacists and coons will not remind you of. And that is, you had Emmett Till getting murdered, and you had the bus boycott. And so they selected Martin Luther King because the church, it was something that Martin Luther King was hesitant on doing. It wasn't like something he chose to do, or they put him in this real big position and they said, okay, go out and be leader. But they didn't envision this. They didn't envision that Martin Luther King would even be a legend and do different things. So when they did the bus boycott, the boycott was put in place so that black people wouldn't have to sit in the back of the bus. That was the purpose of the bus boycott with Rosa Parks. You guys all know the story. But before Dr. King even came into prominence, you had systematic white supremacy going on in the South in the United States. They had segregation going on and Jim Crow, which they were not mentioned in history books or TV. They just said they fought for rights. That's what they say about Rosa Parks and Dr. Martin King. That's the censorship that white supremacists is putting out there so that we will not blame the United States for being a racist country, which the United States is a racist country run by white supremacists because white supremacy is global around the United States. It's global. It's a global thing. But Dr. King, when he came into prominence, he actually was hurting the white economy. He was hurting of the United States economy at the time, going into the 60s. That's why at times the white establishments was attacking Dr. King. It was government officials and police officials that really King was taking on. See, they won't tell you that in history books. They make out like it was just some random lynch mobs and all that. No, it was the government establishment, like today, that was taking on Martin Luther King. In fact, we'll go as far as to say this. They called Martin Luther King a terrorist. They said he was a commie. They said that just like Black Lives Matters, they said Martin Luther King was racist. The media, if you go back and you look at those old newsreels, the white supremacists, they used different tactics to attack Martin Luther King. And when those attacks didn't work and he didn't bow down, they started to try to blow his house up. That was the tactics of the United States government at the time. And white terrorists in the United States. And that's what the books will not tell you is that Martin Luther King was going against white supremacy. And a lot of coons and white supremacist historians will tell you that, he just stood up, for like Gandhi, but they won't tell you what Martin Luther King was standing up to, just like Mandela. Mandela was battling white supremacy in Africa. He was battling a white supremacy, but that's another story about Mandela. Martin Luther King, because in order to defeat white supremacy, you have to hit them with the economy. But the way the today's modern white supremacists have laid it out is they laid it out where, okay, Dr. King fought for the race. He fought against racism, which he did. But Martin Luther King was not trying to change racist mind. He was trying to ask for justice from the federal government to enact laws to protect black people. That was the whole goal. And today, the white supremacist wants to make out, and we write history as if the United States was always a great country and was fair to all minorities, all black people, and it wasn't true. The United States had a history of violence against various minority groups, and not only was it just violence, but laws that were put in place, mainly black people. They burned Tulsa, Oklahoma down, Rosewood. The Klan was killing black men and black women in the South if they opened businesses. They wanted black people to be subservient to them. They wanted them to work and get gypped out of money from sharecroppers, because at the time a lot of the black people in the South were sharecroppers, and some of them had houses that they would rent from a lot of the white landowners. They would, if a black person did something, they took their land. That's just how shady a lot of the whites would be in small towns in the South. That's why you had a major migration in the North and in the West Coast. I digress. All that was it put in place, and it led to Dr. King. That was where the rise of Dr. King came from, was because you had the migrations going on from the South. You had the murders going on in the South. You had the lynchings going on in the South. You had the segregation going on in the South. You had all that stuff being put in place, and the church and Dr. King started to step up to that establishment, the United States governments, state and local and federal governments, and white supremacists was not having it. White media was not having it, and so they tried to think of different ways to discredit Martin Luther King. Now today, people want to say rewrite history and say he just fall to pull their heartstrings. That's basically the argument that you get today from white supremacists, is that Dr. King was fighting against just somebody's heart, and they try to compare and parallel that to today's culture. Like, white people try to compare and they try to pull in Martin Luther King's arguments to attack black arguments, when they will not tell you that they own majority of the shit that was going on back then. They own the media, they own the cops, they own the sheriffs, they own the governorships, the city council people. All of them were undercover Klansmen and white supremacists in disguise. Those were race soldiers that you had back in those days. And the United States government has never been held accountable for the killing and lynching and slaves in the United States of America, and keeping black people down in apartheid, because Dr. King was like Mandela. He was fighting in an apartheid world at the time. That's what was going on in those days. And the United States government and the propaganda machine, the dominant society, has now flipped the script in some coons that Dr. King was trying to pull at heartstrings. So a lot of black people who are ignorant to Martin Luther King think he was weak. Because I listen to black people because they've been brainwashed by the dominant society into thinking that Martin Luther King was just talking about little white girls and little black boys holding hands and the March on Washington. So when some hard militant blacks see these documentaries and films, they're not seeing the whole Martin Luther King. They're not seeing what Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks really fight for, and it was fighting against systematic white supremacy. That thing that most black people and coons don't believe exists. They don't believe white supremacy exists. But this was under 50 years ago. This was like 50 years ago that this stuff was taking place. So Dr. King was raging against white supremacy, and that's what led to his death at the end of the day, because he was fighting against a system that was oppressing black people in this country. The Klan had so much power back then. Black people were own businesses, they burned it down. Black people made more money than white people, they shut that shit down. They killed you. And Martin Luther King was tired of them doing that. So that's why you had a new surge of black leaders that was put in place, like Malcolm X and the Black Panthers and all that. But coons and white supremacists, they refused to acknowledge that. So they tried to get behind Martin Luther King's safe message. But Martin Luther King has dozens of other speeches. Martin Luther King has spoken on historical stuff. Martin Luther King has spoken on the economic structure in the United States. Dr. Martin Luther King has pushed black group economics even. He has pushed all that, and that was a threat to the dominant society and the white power structure that was going on. And so that's why Dr. King had to get killed. He was not just a person that advocated little white girls and little black boys holding hands. It went beyond that. He was advocating equal rights through the federal government to protect black people and give the same rights as the Caucasian people. But I think that what got mixed up in the civil rights message was that we should have, it shouldn't have been minorities, it should have been for black people, and most of the economic monies should have went to blacks, like reparations and other things, jobs and loans and ways to make companies. And that's what it's all about in the United States for black people. That's the next wave, is black empowerment. That's what Dr. King was advocating for, was black empowerment and justice. If anybody want to know the true Martin Luther King, I would suggest reading some good books, deep research, and go on YouTube even. But like and share this video, people. Peace out.